In this video, I'm going to share my top tips for hip pain relief. This is all based on personal experience with debilitating hip pain and beating it, and also helping thousands of other people beat their own hip pain since 2007. And if you watch through to the end, I'm going to share a bonus tip as well as an exercise demonstration that'll help you understand how to help yourself in the long game to beating hip pain and finally getting hip pain relief without drugs, pills, and surgery. So if you're ready, let's get ready to think right, move right, and feel right. I'm Matt Hsu from Upright Health, and on this channel, I help you think right, move right, and feel right so your body feels good. So if you don't want to miss out on any future videos like this one, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Now let's jump into tip number one, and that's to don't chase or get stuck in the medical diagnosis. So you need to understand that hip pain medical diagnoses are often pretty much just made up. They have very flimsy scientific evidence to back them up, and the treatments for them are generally useless. If you look at the general recommendations, whether it's bursitis, labral tears, whether it's chondral cysts, whether it's hip impingement or hip arthritis, you get the same recommendations. Stop moving and get injections or surgery. That's pretty much the entirety of the options when you go to the medical system for hip pain relief. But there are a few things you need to understand about the medical system and how it diagnoses the cause of your hip pain. They say that they can do x-rays and MRIs and find the actual cause of your pain, but it's not actually true. Many studies have shown that hip arthritis in an x-ray has absolutely no correlation to hip pain, and hip pain has no correlation to what you see in an x-ray. The same is true for MRIs that show hip labral tears, chondral cysts, or whatever other structural deformity or damage that those things see. In addition, all the special tests that they do to check your range of motion and see whether or not you get pain have no correlation to the x-ray or MRI findings. In fact, none of those tests actually show any solid validity to helping determine what's actually causing your pain. What they do show is that you just can't get into some of those positions and that those positions are painful for you, but that doesn't prove that the problem is inside your hip joint because you have some sort of deformity. In fact, those deformities that doctors talk about with hip impingement, FAI, femoral acetabular impingement, actually show no correlation to the development of hip pain or hip arthritis, even though doctors claim that there's some connection. The truth is, those theories have not actually been backed by rigorous research. Those theories were propagated in the early 2000s by surgeons who had just invented a new surgical technique, but they hadn't actually done the necessary research to prove that their theories were true. These days, they've done more research and they're finding, oh wait, there doesn't seem to be a connection between the bone shapes and your actual hip pain. So even if you do have a medical deformity or signs of damage in your hip, you still need to focus instead on what you can control. You need to focus on things that you can influence to get the hip pain to go away. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck relying on somebody else and praying and hoping that the savior is going to be able to help you with your hip pain. And that is a road to disappointment and frustration. Especially given the success rates on things like hip arthroscopy, you really don't want to put all your eggs in that basket. Tip number two is to pick an ambitious goal in terms of your recovery. So you have hip pain right now and you want to get relief from that, and that is perfect. That's great. As a short or medium term goal, hip pain relief is fine. But you need to focus on something bigger than that. So whatever that goal is, make it clear in your mind. For me, when I was really suffering with hip pain in my early 20s, my ambitious goal was to get back to playing ice hockey as a goalie. It was something that gave me joy in my life. It was something that helped me feel engaged, and it helped me just feel like I was alive. If you don't have something like that in mind that you're trying to get back to, then pick a new thing that inspires you to keep your body moving. If your only goal is to just get out of hip pain, then you might achieve that, but once you do, you're going to stop doing the things that helped you get there, because you're probably going to just assume that once you've fixed your hip pain for a week that it's supposed to stay away forever. The reality is your hips only feel good when you keep the muscles trained to be balanced and really functional. So if you just say, well, I'm out of pain now, then you're gonna stop doing all the things that helped your hips feel good because, you know, it's good enough now, and then your hip pain is going to come back. If you instead focus on something ambitious, something athletic, something fun, something that gives you energy and that inspires you, you will always have something to strive for that's going to help you push your hips to be better, to be stronger, to be more flexible, and to be healthier and happier in the long run. So one great way to do this, which I include in my Healthy Hips program, which I'll talk about later, is to ask yourself, what do I want to be? What do I want to accomplish? And just write it out for yourself and keep it clear in your mind. You can have something as simple as, I want to be able to play with my grandkids, or I want to be able to play with my nephew and niece. I want to be able to play ice hockey. I want to be able to surf. I want to be the best darn bouldering, rock climbing beast out there on the wall in 2 years' time. Whatever your goal is, just keep it in mind, have it clear to yourself, and make sure you're taking the steps necessary to build your hips towards that goal. And once you have that goal in mind, it might be there already, please drop it in the comment section down below and share what your ambitious goal is with me. I'd love to see it. All right, let's talk about tip number 3, and that is to exercise. Remember that your bone shapes, the damage that's supposedly in your hips, the bursitis, the whatever, those things are out of your control. But what is in your control are the muscles that surround your hips that move the bones of your body. Remember that if you get to a position that doesn't feel good, that's a sign to you that the muscles around the hip, the muscles of the core, don't know how to handle the position. It doesn't necessarily mean anything about damage. There is no proof of that. It sounds plausible, but nobody's actually done any real studies to prove these types of associations. And in fact, if they are true, you wouldn't see success stories from people who have trained away their hip pain and made it possible to do things that were impossible before. You see these stories from people with hip arthritis, people with hip labral tears, people with hip impingement bone shapes, all training their hips to feel better, regardless of what medical professionals have said is impossible. You want to teach your muscles to have strength at every length. The stronger they are, the better you can control the full range of motion, the better you're going to feel overall. Once you can do something like touching your toes, it's going to be a whole new world. Once you can do something like squat so that you can accomplish basic human functions like pooping in the wild, you're going to notice that your hips are not complaining so much. And as you master different ranges of motion, you're going to notice that your hips no longer hit weird, painful spots throughout the day, and you're going to feel more capable and confident in the long run. Remember, if you want your hips to feel right, you need to ATM, always think muscles. The way your bones are able to move relative to one another is all based on muscle function. So train those muscles to move right, and you will be able to feel right. And that brings us to tip number 4, which is don't just sit there. If you are sitting on your butt because you think you need to rest your painful hips, I can guarantee your hips are going to get worse. I know this from personal experience, following medical advice. I did a whole lot of sitting, and the only thing that happens when you sit a lot is the muscles that you're sitting on get really weak, they get flat, they get atrophied, and guess what? Atrophy aches. Instead of sitting on your butt all day long, make sure to take frequent breaks, get up, stand up, move around, do some butt exercises, do whatever it takes to keep blood pumping through your butt. Otherwise, your butt's gonna get real flabby, real weak, and you're gonna notice your hips are getting a lot more achy and painful. I made a whole video about this with 3 tips to help you with hip pain while sitting. Be sure to check it out. I'm gonna link it in the description box and at the end of this video, but we're not done yet. So before we get to the final bonus tip, I do want to take you through an exercise demonstration so you understand some of the thought processes that go into fixing your own hip pain. So let's say you're sitting on your butt all day. Your hamstrings are getting killed, your butt muscles are getting killed because they're just being smashed and squashed into the chair underneath your body. Well, what's going to happen? The muscles behind the hip joint, these big butt and hamstring muscles, they actually need to be strong. They need to be functional. Otherwise, your femur is not being stabilized properly. You're not going to feel good, and you shouldn't feel good because you have been killing these muscles. Instead, you need to start waking those muscles up so that they can exert the forces they need to exert, so that the hip joint feels correct, so that the femur is sitting in the hip joint correctly, so that everything functions correctly. So to do that, you need to wake them up. Simple way to do that, for example, is to just get on your back and start doing things like bridges. You can go nice and slow and controlled. You're not just like humping the air like this. You're going slowly, making sure that you feel the butt muscles squeeze and slowly back down. Same thing over and over again. Now, you can make this a little more challenging by then lifting one foot and slowly dropping back down. I'll show it on this other leg. So I go up, lift this foot. So now all of the load, like the weight of my body, is being put into this butt cheek, right? And I'm going to slowly go down. What this is doing is teaching these muscles to contract concentrically, meaning they're shortening up as they contract. And then in this position, I have an isometric hold. So I'm building strength in this position, and then I'm slowly going down, and I'm teaching these muscles to have eccentric contraction, meaning they're working while they're lengthening. You need to make sure muscles can do this, right? You want concentric, isometric, and eccentric contraction ability. Okay, so we're going up, slowly back down, and you basically just do this till you get fatigued. As you get better and better at this, you can make this harder. One simple way is, instead of just doing it from top to bottom, you can just say, you know what? This guy needs to get better at doing it all by himself. And then same thing on the other side. And you do this to fatigue on one side, switch to the other side. You will notice that one side is going to be weaker than the other. Almost every human being out there is going to see that asymmetry. You're probably never going to make them perfectly symmetrical, but you do want to work towards getting them pretty darn close, because what happens if one glute is really strong and one glute is really weak? Well, then you have an asymmetry, and that asymmetry is going to cause one side to be pushed forward because that glute is just stronger, more beefy, and contracted more, so you're going to be off to a side. And you don't want to be twisted, because what happens if you're twisted? Well, if you're twisted to one side, what's going on at your spine? What are the hip joints doing? Are you really going to feel comfortable walking around with your pelvis all twisted like that? The answer is no. So you want to be paying attention to where things feel weak and how they compare from side to side. And there's plenty more you can think about building your glutes. I will have some links in the description box that'll explain how you can build your glutes a little more. There's a video that will help you. And it's not just your glutes. You want to think about your inner thighs, your hip flexors, making sure you have the strength to even lift your legs. You want to think about your outer hips. There are muscles that wrap your hips in 360 degrees, and they all need some help because you've definitely been neglecting them by sitting on your butt all day. This one set of glute exercises is not going to give you lasting hip pain relief. You do need to progress it. You do need to make sure that you're building strength. And also, you want to be building flexibility, but that'll just have to be a topic for another video. Improving hip flexibility and the strength of your hip muscles is all part of my Healthy Hips program, which I encourage you to check out. If you go to uprighthealth.com/DIY, you can find the Healthy Hips program and see how it'll help you rebuild your hips at home. But before you do that, let's talk about the bonus tip. Beware the physically feeble fallacy, otherwise known as As you try to fix your hip pain yourself, there are going to be a lot of naysayers. There are going to be people who say it's impossible. There are going to be people who say you're just going to hurt yourself more if you try to fix your hip pain yourself. And you need to realize that there are generally two categories of people who fall into what I call the physically feeble fallacy. First are people who are in hip pain themselves, people who have some sort of chronic pain. It could be shoulder pain or back pain or knee pain, and they themselves haven't figured out how to fix their hip pain, and they have accepted it as a part of their life, and they want you to stay in the painful hole with them. They don't want to be alone in their suffering. They're very happy to have you in the hole with them, and they don't want you to be climbing out of the hole, because that will mean that they themselves are stuck in the hole. And if they see you successfully get out of the hole, that means they're going to have to accept that they have responsibility for their own pain, and they don't really want to have that. The second major group are the professionals, the health experts who have no idea how to help you and want to just tell you to submit your body to some surgeries that apparently have pretty poor success rates. And so they'll tell you, hey, go do that thing, because there's no way you can help yourself, because they want to feel better about themselves not knowing the answer to how to fix hip pain for you. They don't want to feel powerless and helpless and a little bit ignorant. It's not comfortable to be in that space. They want to prove to you that they have answers, so they're going to give you an answer that absolves them of responsibility for giving you any useful solution. And that's how you end up with voices in the medical community telling you, hey, you know what, there's nothing you can do. And it's how you end up with other people telling you, I have pain too, man. This is just how it is. Let's just enjoy it and have a beer. So don't forget what you've learned in this video. Keep your body moving, keep exercising, keep stretching, keep strengthening muscles in a smart, gradual way. Make sure you're making progress towards your ambitious goal, and don't let the naysayers who are getting trapped in the physically feeble fallacy trap you in that painful hole. I'm going to link to several free resources down below, including follow-along videos that'll help you build strength and flexibility in your hips from a very foundational level. I'll also link to the Healthy Hips program at uprighthealth.com/DIY to help you rebuild your hips at home yourself. For those hip pain tips while sitting, be sure to check this video out here, and there's another good one you might like here. Like, share, and subscribe with the bell notification on, and as always, I hope you remember that pain sucks. Life shouldn't.